There's like a blue line going across my screen, and I can never tell if streaming started before or after that. And have you guys heard about like the millennial pause? You can tell like how old somebody is by how long they wait to start talking when they start a video. And this is the first time that I'm aware of like millennials being considered the old people by whoever is younger than them. Because you can tell those old people, they always wait for the stream to start. So anyway, I think this one started, and I promised a short intro, already gone way beyond that. But hey, everybody, this is Gimbalabs Playground. It's the 4th of April, 2023. It's finally above 60 degrees Fahrenheit where I live, which makes me feel really happy. I hope things are good where you are. And yeah, we're really excited to welcome back Swarm and Treasury Guild this week to continue a conversation that was started last week at Playground. And that's going to take us deeper into the work of Treasury Guild today. So Miro, Andre, welcome guys. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, James, and all community.
Yes, thank you for having us. Okay, so I'll quickly give a background of where we started and where we are right now, and just a little glimpse of where we are going as well. So we started about 15 months ago. We had to build a treasury system from scratch for CC admin team. So we just started with like a simple form built with vanilla JavaScript that takes it takes user input and then it points to a GitHub folder. So we had this file folder structure in GitHub that would save these JSON files for transactions. And we would also create an issue that would send a message to Discord. It was a GitHub action that got triggered by these issues. So once that was up and running, we added a feature to do bulk transactions. And later, well, first we added metadata. Once wallets started supporting metadata, we added that, and then we added bulk transactions to our system so we can start doing bulk transactions. And it was about around that time that Devo joined. So Swarm started doing a lot of dework transactions. So Devo built this system in Excel that creates this JSON export that we would paste in Game Changer and then do the transaction. So we had to add that feature to our system as well. So we will take the same JSON file, add it to our system, and format it so it's the same as all the other transactions we did for the other projects. So we have this one, like a small little database in GitHub with all these transactions. So once all that was up and running, the next step was to replace Gitbook because Miroslav had to enter all these transactions in Gitbook so that people had something to look at. So we had to design a dashboard, but in order to do that, I think the next step was to build a database. So the metadata we used, that format changed over the months. So we had to build an admin app first that took all this old GitHub data and prepared it for this new database. The database also makes use of Dandelion. So it will look at the transaction IDs and then it will get the fees and the actual amounts for these transactions and then save that in the database. And then the next step was to build a dashboard. So this dashboard also has like a small little self-auditing feature. So it will have like the life balance and a running balance. So if those balances aren't the same, then we know, okay, something is wrong. One of the transactions are wrong, or something is wrong. And that I think that's the last thing we built, was this dashboard. And it's got basic features. It just shows the transactions. You can export a CSV, and it's got a transaction view. Miroslav will show you this dashboard after this. And then the next step, he'll also show you a DApp we recently finished. It's just a small DApp. It was just a test mesh.js just to see how that works. So the next step for us is to move our whole treasury system to that. So we'll use mesh to do the transactions and then connect that DApp with our database and the bot as well. So does Miroslav, does that system work on your side already?
Everything except GitHub, huh? So you can run GitHub from your side. Huh?
Okay, let me share this. This is the old system we are using. I hope my computer doesn't crash. Let's see.
And during it loads, I would love to add one thing, but I think definitely deserves some attention, love, and shout out. When Miroslav and Andre started, I didn't have any idea of code, any idea of programming. And while developing the whole thing, they teach themselves as well how to code, how to build, how to do all this stuff. I think it's really important to mention. So the whole thing really started from scratch. And I think shows a beautiful example for people also who have no experience and nothing and want to build. You can definitely do this. And Gimbalabs is a massive, great example for this. And then Rhea and Miro as well. Just wanted to drop this because, yes.
It's thrilling. Yeah. And I remember the last time you guys presented at Playground, and that was the story. This is so cool just to hear this is the process, guys.
And you know, my laptop crashed, so maybe Miroslav, you can send oh wait, it's back.
You bought that laptop before you were a developer, right?
Yes.
It wasn't intended for this.
It's not the bad laptop, but I think it's a driver problem.
That makes sense.
Maybe Andre, I can share the screen and show the dashboard, and you can
Yes,
try
yeah,
to
we
fix
can
there
look at
something.
the,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
So, yeah, like Andre said, this is our dashboard, and for example, I mean, this is organization that we are collaborate with and project. So maybe we can choose SingularityNet, and this is actually how looks like dashboard. And for example, if we will check what's going on, we have here 30 people that we actually send rewards. And now you can just paste transaction ID, and through this transaction ID, you can choose any wallet, and you can see what this wallet actually received, how many rewards for each single person in that transaction. So this is it. And then the DApp that actually Andre mentioned. So we are still testing, and now we have this single transaction, and yeah, we can just show you guys quick. So we will connect the wallet, and I don't know, for example, Swarm organization will put label, and okay, like 1 ADA. So we can also add here how many actually tokens and which tokens we have in the wallet we can add here. And then we'll just click the build or send. And then we have, I'll show you this quick. We have also metadata here. So this is actually cool. I will not send this 1 ADA, but yeah, I think that this is it from my side. I don't know, Andre, if you solve out this issue with laptop, maybe you can try. Huh?
Let me try again. Can you see this?
Yes, we also see this warning. Some warnings you have this in the okay.
Oh,
Cool.
that's
You can close that. Cool.
okay. So yeah, this is the old system. We need to replace this because this thing is barely functioning. But so this is where we do single transactions. If you go into the wallet, you would copy the metadata here, copy it. So we use Typhon to do transactions. If we do bulk transactions, we would, let's do, we usually when we do Devos transactions, we just copy the JSON in here, and then once we submit, I'll show what happens when we submit. So manual, we also have, this CSV sheets that we prepare for the manual payments. And then we would just select it and you can copy if you press this, then you just paste the wallet address in the wallet when you do the actual payments. So what happens when you submit this, say IG, when you submit, it will, this is where the JSON file gets saved and it will create an issue. So when you close this issue, it triggers a GitHub action that sends the Discord message. So the idea with the new system is we'll move to that DApp version, and then we'll just hook up a Discord bot to that. And then instead of the JSON, just send the data to the new database. And then after that, I think it will also eventually evolve into something else. We are talking with Randall. We might be building something on his platform. There's also a possibility. I also want to look at Tevo's system and try and bolt that into this step. So gonna look at that. So there's a couple of things, but I think we'll have a better idea once this step is finished. And at that stage, we'll see who we are working with and what needs to happen next. I think that's it. Devo, do you have anything to add? Maybe.
No, I cannot, but I think it as a showcase of what happens with the transactions and how it looks like was all shared. And from my side, I haven't really done any of that. The only thing I could add perhaps is that like the dashboard was quite a neat thing, even though I have now found ways to figure out where the funds are in other ways, but I think like I'm more like a coding person. I can look at Excels and like figure out where the metadata is and control F through these Cardano scans. But if you provide a service to a client who just wants to get things rewarded, and if somebody asks him, hey, this wallet address get paid, they just want a simple page where to go, copy paste and get answers. They don't really want to dig and find and track where things are. So having a dashboard has been a quite good update.
Yeah. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. That dashboard will eventually add a feature where you just connect your wallet and then you can see all the payments you received from us.
And maybe also for the context, because the last playground, we stopped with exactly this, the CSV file, right? Where we said, okay, once we have a bounty board where we are able, let's say, to recognize or to observe community engagements, how do we get this data on chain on an effective way? Because through the experience, we saw bounty board and management as one side, but to handle the transaction and the rewards for it, oh shit, we faced so many challenges and didn't have any idea then actually, oh, we have 12 different contributors with several rewards on several tokens to different wallets. Shit, how are we doing this actually? How do we get contributors from a single task into a project, into a CSV, into a JSON, to the wallet? And this is then the whole process actually where we needed to figure out how to make community contribution machine readable and on-chain. And Trey and Mira are extremely humble, I would say, from this presentation, because there are a bunch of details and stuff. And I think Tivo's treasury is Excel systems. For example, Tivo maybe would like to give a short insight, because this actually, he developed a whole app actually on Excel, which enabled us then to build this bridge. We figured out, wait, actually to make this effectively happen, we need a whole process. And quite early we said also, we don't want to limit ourselves to say, okay, only on DWalk and Discord and only this. So really try to figure out the process. We can say, okay, we know in which space we act. Some communities prefer that. Some other communities prefer this. How can we generally design a process which allows several platforms and tools to communicate with each other to the end result and having it as a metadata on chain? And quite rapidly we will have been faced with, oh shit, we don't need only one product or service. We need a whole pipeline of actions to follow up with each other, actually. I think this is really let's say, was the most difficult part to solve, really this pipeline. How do we get there? And it's not one thing who is really able to do this. So Tivo walked on this side and Trey and Mira walked on their side. I think this is really extremely valuable thing as well. So you need a bunch of stuff actually if you want to have it proper and especially fully public and transparent. So to make it easy for people as well to understand what is happening on the systems. Okay.
So what
She
I
was
did
doing
is
it.
I create a task. So we do need to take this task out, but before we do, who already has a Swarm account, maybe we can be faster. And we could collect our names here because we need to recognize something in order to use the Excel. We don't have unfinished business, so to say. Jonathan. I don't know.
Jonathan's Jad. J-A-D. Yes.
Who is that? One.
Oh shit, we shouldn't say this actually, because now we break privacy. Sorry, John. Everybody wants this. Ignore that.
Oh yeah, there is a lot of privacy stuff coming to happen. So this is an ongoing question because all of these people are public in some way. And what we're gonna do is I'm going to refresh. Like one thing we have to do with Twork is that it doesn't actually give you the right export unless you refresh your page or reload. So, and things you will learn when you use the tools you are kind of using. So we have a bunch of names here. So I'm going to export that file. And what are we going to see here is all of these names which we're exporting will be connected in the Excel with the wallet address, because we do need that information. So I move this to the desktop. Yeah, quickly, perhaps like in Excel, I use ActiveX directory, and basically the buttons are all here. So I could use Open Twork on from the Excel. If I like, I can execute all these shell files or scripts or whatever I want. Then I created a small subfolder. This was a huge progress actually to get into this stage. At the very beginning, we did manually foldering, but found out, like for example, Felix, it doesn't even know sometimes how to move one file to another folder, and that took like minutes and quite a lot of time to explain. And that was a quite common thing, like why this file needs to be in that folder, why can't it just be anywhere, and like and like creating the pipeline together. So we created a system where in configuration file you say where is a download folder, and that's it. And then this thing will find me with a file from Bounty Desk List, because I'm only reading CSV files. I move that into import folder file. So this is our Google desktop drive, so that all our Swarm members are connected in one Google Drive, and the treasury manager is kind of managing that folder. So if I refresh, then I'm able to load up all the files under there. And all I do is load file. Usually what we do is we download a bunch of export files from a lot of different communities, and we load all of them at once, and then we get a huge list of transactions. So what happened is, from this previous export, only one activity was in review and audited. So we got this, joined the Gimbalabs 100 gimbals, and then from the name, it captured the gimbal, although we didn't have to do it. And then we have configurations. So if I go to token conf, we have like rules that if a certain group is an active, we can add that we want to have minimum amount to them. And because we are boosting AGX economy, we said, okay, every task you do, you get at least 2 AGX at minimum, so that you're rewarded with something. And then it also provides information to people, like what is this token and from elsewhere. Then we have like this system where we added fee to SingularityNet. So we created like a gaming contract, and also have it with Fluid, that every time they do a task, 1% of that task is also going to the treasury wallet. So yeah, okay, so conf start this, and then now we can also create as many tokens what we want. So if you want to add new token to the system, you create like a new row to here, which is like, what is the token name, what is the ticker name, what is the multiplier and policy there. And this is all you need in order to recognize new tokens from the titles and also put them into the JSON file. So back in here, so this end of the columns were all generated by the tokens found. So if I would have added an USD into the rewards or anything else, it would have recognized that ticker and added 8 here or more rewards. And right now, it looks like we have all the wallet addresses which I added here. Usually what we do is like register wallet address. So if there are new people, then we will see like a list of unregistered wallet names or new addresses. And then we use the Discord name to connect a wallet address. And we have like a bunch of names in here, so that there could be that on Swarm, there was already a member and he moved to a new group, does tasks there. So we are able to kind of reuse their wallets from a different network if they are okay with that. And it's just automating and making it easier to connect, even though it's still quite painful to kind of select the addresses themselves. but at least now systematically we have ways to kind of automate it, making the document or the auditing and moving into system easier. Yeah. What you also didn't kind of see all these like group name, catalyst, swarm, soup groups, they all appear automatically based on pre-configurations, either by file name or tags. So if I go to conf, there are main configuration which we use are these task labels. So from keyword, if there is a creating keyword, we think about content creation. And so this is one way we have to try to kind of differentiate the tasks and contributions. So it's easier later to kind of analyze that information. And same thing with tags, we kind of categorize them and then default group names. So different files give different organizations. And the final one is simply different export files. So if you don't want to have to see the entire link. Anyway, then task labels that I spoke, they now based on configurations, they will be automated, or you can just manually add anything. So all the orange columns are meant to be changed if you need or checked. Once all is done or good, then we just update contributions and it should say, yep, all good. Now it went into our database, or like the database also put it into Excel. So right now we haven't really put the database, so it's just Excel rows. And if I refresh, then it will load up all the wallets that are not still unpaid. And I can filter by, for example, here, Open Tab Framework, what Catalyst Swarm, and let's take blanks, and we can see a bunch of wallet addresses missing. That's why we cannot reward them. So if you are here and you're like, oh, what? I had to give wallet address. It's your opportunity. But in the list, the same wallet addresses and like the contributions are listed here. So if I filter out the addresses that I can pay, usually we also check how many AJAX total data we need in some instances, but that's not read. Also, I can get the byte amount because there is like a maximum thing you can put into JSON script. And so if there is like hundreds of contributions, there is also like a quick check to see if event fits to the blockchain. And yeah, if you have any USD, let's say we want to pay, I don't have Felix extra amount, like $10, because he's great and he was very important person here, or Andre and Mira for facilitating. We can add dollars and convert it to ADA, and then we will see it like a quick way to kind of get the values in. And but right now I'm going to delete it. And the main button is this generate JSON, validate the exchange rate. Sometimes I'm doing stuff quickly. We want to make sure that the exchange rates are correct, even though there's RORs are small. Yeah, once I've done that, then it opens up this file, and this is the entire transaction. And what we can do with that is copy paste it, open Game Changer, and we paste it here, and then we basically do the transaction. And the metadata is included in that. What cannot include? What did I do?
And then all the stuff fits in what just Miroslav and then present.
Usually Myron Under does the payments. I probably don't have AJAX in my wallet, or something is missing, or Gimbals. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, either way, that's the full cycle. And on the standard, you can see the Gimbals and wallet end of the wallet crisis who gets, and that was also the information which you saw from Myro dashboard. So, but in a more readable format compared to this. And now we recognized a Gimbalabs session. That's the thing.
And maybe one part, Tivo, can you go back to conf the configuration thing. Because we saw this is actually quite tricky, but very crucial part. Say, until a certain point, let's say, for example, let's assume Gimbalabs would like to do this. Well, usually what we know from projects like Swarm or Gimbalabs, we do not have only one specific project, right? There are normally a bunch of projects. Each project has its own contributors. And what we did here, and this is an ongoing evergreen thing, actually to figure out what projects do you have in which areas? How can you categorize this? Which tags can you add to it? To already identify the areas, because sometimes you want to differentiate the payments even. Say, okay, this one we pay in this transaction, this project, but the other project we pay in another transaction. And this is actually quite a sexy thing when you think that in a later stage, let's say, for example, where it's going to with Swan right now, let's say governance, for example. Very often we have this problem of everybody's voting on everything, which is kind of really weird, because when you think about it, should everybody vote on everything? Or should the people who actually are involved in the project have more decision-making power than the people who are not engaged in the project? Because the people who are engaged in a specific project, they have much more understanding and knowledge about the thing, which forcefully should maybe also mean they should have another say in the decisions which are made on their project. But how are you able to identify those people? And therefore, these groups, subgroups, and tags are actually quite crucial. Because with this, you have a data set where you can always go back and say, why does this person has more decision-making right or power on the specific case? And then you always have the data set behind which legitimizes, which shows, hey, because this person engaged since 1 year in weekly recognized tasks in this area, and you can provide the expertise. And you can prove the expertise. And this actually very often we always coming back to the stuff like, hey, this is that nice. Oh shit, another project appears. How can we link this to the stuff? And how can we really bring back to the people to say, okay, where do you engage? And it's also quite nice to discover as a project yourself a little bit, like a self-finding trip to say, which areas do we have actually? Which groups do we have with topics and domains? And where do people engage? And by breaking it down into the most basic data sets, helps a lot actually to identify what all the stuff you are doing.
For example, what I'm showing right now is all the tasks from SingularityNet and in which group they are. For example, ambassador translators and ambassador program are actually two different ones. But and the tags they are using, or at least the tags we are deriving their tags to be more likely from the givers, and all the combinations of that. So ambassador program, for example, doing community communication, content creation, governance and community communication at the one time, operations and community communication. And so this gives like a bit of visualization. And my hope is that perhaps next step could be to a bit organize and differentiate the subgroup, and then over iterations, like going back and forth, looking at the data, and then improving the way we recognize activities and the contributions we're providing, and then looking at the data, how it looks like, and then like what Felix mentioned, like how, because all of this is attached to a specific person who actually completed that, and you can aggregate and you can quantify that, how much one, like facilitators probably are doing a lot more community communication. But then you will see under operations, you will see different people doing stuff. And it also matters, like, is it operations under marketing pool or in deep funding? And they probably will have, again, different expertise from that, and like, yeah, seeing these connections and like trying to visualize all the potentials. And maybe it's also like an organic thing. Like if you don't put the framework on top of them and say which are going to be, but instead you are tasking yourself and then looking at the results and then also improving your way you're tasking. So it's like it's the meta effect we are having. And this is the PBL stuff. We don't know what's happening. We're just building the pathway, but making sure that we don't centralize or like, well, we do want standards, but we don't imply the standards. So I don't know how to describe it.
Emergent
we don't want to
standards.
impose it. Exactly. We don't want to impose it. We rather want, exactly like Seth mentioned, like you said, James, to have it emerged by the people who are actually doing this and not impose it on the people who are doing this by the people who are coordinating. So coordinators, managers are rather much more facilitators, but they don't set the rules. It's a contributor and participant himself who set the rules, actually.
But yeah, but recently it's been more like this treasury system, and it's actually less about system. It's about training and understanding people. and the self-governance is like very important for us to make it even scalable. Like if one person has to do a task and another person does it, and the third one or the same creator has to audit it, it's just 3 times doing the same thing, because sometimes the doing a task takes as much time as describing it, and sometimes auditing takes as much time as doing it. So it's, if you're able to train people to do a task and describe to a task and audit the task on their own, although how do you verify, how do you audit? It's like, it's all like, yeah, hard one. But I think when we get to that point that we are able to onboard people to self-govern and provide data in a machine readable format and in a collaborative sense, that you sense who are you working with, why are you working with them, and what is the output, then we basically naturally will be able to just run huge projects, just relying on the output we give out. But yeah, maybe I'm just getting too much ahead of myself.
No, it's so good to hear your perspective about this. Like, I'm wondering, not to, if anybody's willing to put themselves on the spot, does anybody have a story about like a time that you wanted to make a decision unilaterally, but you, after thinking about it, you decided not to because you were like, oh, that's the kind of centralized decision that we're trying to further distribute? Quasar thinks that question is funny. I'm not sure why.
Anyone want to put themselves on the spot? I guess not.
Okay.
I will.
It touched.
Oh, go ahead, Felix.
You started already. After you.
I mean, I guess for me, in the very early stages of our project, I mean, flipping the question around, in the very early stages of our project specifically, I feel like more centralized decision making is needed, or perhaps with core team members. But as we grow incrementally and involve more of the community, these tools will be necessary in order to disintermediate decision making, right? As more people come in. So it's like slowly but surely mixing in, right? Mixing in, centralization with decentralization with the community, I guess, right? Core team versus community, really. And just, anyway, yeah. But I am interested and very interested in what tools I could leverage to take it to that next phase of decision making.
I think last week I said in sense to say, sometimes I ended up in, for example, you set up bounties and you recognize you don't have the capacity yet to manage this bounty properly. And I think this plays really a little bit in this thing as well. I think, for example, centralized decision-making has a lot to do with the capacity as well. It's far more easy to make a decision yourself than to make a decision together, actually. And what we recognize quite often is, for example, that you can use actually, let's say, very often, for example, my job in this whole thing is very often to experiment with bounties, create them, figure out, does it work, how it works, doesn't it work, all the stuff, and somehow need to create the bounty, right? And very often I don't communicate this. I just say, I have a cool idea and say, oh, cool. I take this idea, I throw it there. So it's fully centralized in this regard. But sometimes then you say, cool. Then you have people who engage in all this stuff. And you see, you would like to have done maybe even more, but you don't have the capacity yet. And how can you use your central position in a system like this to get other people engaged and participating, also to empower themselves, that in the later stage, you don't have to be there anymore. So sometimes this playing with a centralized action now for decentralized result later, what is sometimes extremely difficult actually to capture. And very often, people then scream on you or laugh on you or whatnot and all the stuff. And a half a year later, cool, I have duplicated myself 20 times now. So, cool, disintegration, nicely achieved. And on something what you maybe regret in the instance, well, you keep it in mind, but you also want to play it over a longer time. And the centralization, I think, is very often, in order to decentralize ourselves, we have to educate others. And we have to take the space on the beginning, which we build through our expertise and experience, and being not too proud to leave the space then once it's established, and to use your centralized power to establish the space by knowing, well, once it's established, now I have the possibility of becoming obsolete. And then you can be out and other people take over them. And then they do it fucking 1,000 times better than yourself, even because they come with new mindsets, with now new ideas, with fresh ideas. And there's a lot where innovation starts, right? Because once we are comfortable in our system and all, we know to know it and how it works. And sometimes we lose innovation. And then, very often I think we always should attack ourselves actually, and to figure out, how can I decentralize myself? How can I be here with the goal of becoming as fast as possible obsolete, so that the thing don't need me anymore?
Thank you both for putting yourselves on the spot. Session and Felix. And it's true, like we do, right? Like every time we make a decision, we put ourselves on the spot, really. And Felix, I love that concept of making ourselves obsolete, or I like to call it training our replacements, right? Just revealing what's here and doing things imperfectly as a way of saying, hey, anybody who claims they know what they're doing in this industry is at least half full of shit, And so but you can't just say that. You have to show what that looks like.
And I think also as well that actually we realistically have the opposite problem, in that it's very hard to get anybody to make a decision, anybody to grow momentum, anybody to pursue a particular direction. And it's far more likely that there'll be a lot of people on the sidelines shooting you down and saying, no, don't do that. You're trying too hard, or you're trying to coerce or manipulate. But realistically, if we are in the mindset of it's better to apologize than to wait for permission, then we'll probably be getting a whole lot more done, and gaining momentum and getting on with things. So just like the treasury system, it was an imperfect start. And our perfect start would have been a full-blown full stack back-end developer, front-end developer, a strategist, a marketing guy, but no, it was just Miro, and Andre saw a need and jumped in with the raw human capacity that they have to adapt and change and learn and figure stuff out. And that's how we end up with a treasury system, a year down the road that's better than anything else available for that task. So yeah, I think it's very much about cracking on, trying stuff. We're more likely to get knocked back, and if you can take criticism, listen to it, adapt and change. I think that's a better way to be than to be hesitant to get started on something anyway.
We just to springboard on that, Jonathan, we've been feeling our way in the dark for a year, so to speak, right? Just trying to figure out where we're going.
Absolutely.
Wait, Session, you take criticism? I refuse to believe that. Yeah, there's like a thin line, right, between like the rallying cry of decentralization and just full-fledged doing nothing.
And yelling about those who do something and putting themselves out. Each action invites counterattacks, right? And it's something what I learned a lot as well. And also to learn, there will be pushback, there will be people not happy. There's nothing, never there will be something where everybody will be happy. And once you make a decision, it's sure some people will not be happy. Accept this fact and stand for it. You are not perfect, the environment is not perfect, others are not perfect. And accept this fact. And don't be afraid of moving forward just because you will receive pushback. Then you end up doing nothing. It's a beautiful process as well. I think also looking on centralization from a different angle. You can't do centralized decisions when you act in a decentralized vision and context. Because when you have this context and this environment where everybody can make this decision, your decision just becomes one of many now. And it's not centralized anymore. But somebody need to start. Somebody had to start Gimbalabs, right? For example.
What's next for this?
I can tell you what happens in 2 minutes. Shout out to SingularityNet. We're going to the process guild, and all the activities, what's happening there, are turned into dework tasks, and these are going to the cycle of getting more data. So collecting that information is going to be continued. And Andre already mentioned the directions of that. From my side, I'll be just trying to keep up with the demand of features. People are asking, oh, I want this tag to reward this amount. And today morning we talked about, hey, can we use some kind of technology to use multiple inputs so that we had different treasury wallets paying for same transaction? And looks like from the today's game changer discussion, a release came out there, shout out to them too, that it would be possible, and they have the tools for that. So I think community is building great stuff, and it's nice to see how it all works together. And now I'm gonna drop off. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Tavo.
And next step, also to look on this system. At the very beginning, it was just for individuals. And we said, how can we scale this to projects? I said, how can we scale this to communities? Which we did by implementing and introducing it to. And then we said, how can we introduce this to whole ecosystems now, which we did now with SingularityNet? Because I think the main thing here is also it's fully open sourced. And the product, which is built fully open source, only benefits if you have an active and contributors environment, where you have people from several ecosystems, several perspectives, who can bring their feedback and insights back to you in order to improve your development. And next step is definitely figuring out, okay, how can we generate effective feedback loops to the individuals, projects, communities, and ecosystems in which we work with this ecosystem now, to make sure that the use of the system can be properly fed back for really efficient and effective development. And we can use the experience made in other ecosystems because they may have other priorities, total different perspectives. In the best case, your tool does not fit only one purpose or one solution. So you somehow need to figure out how to get the stuff back to you then, right? And that's a whole massive and difficult thing actually, because it takes a shitload of time to introduce systems already to another project or to another person or ecosystem. It takes a shitload of time, what we surely massively underestimated at the beginning. So, yeah, maybe in a week or 2 weeks, fucking no way. It takes minimum 3 minutes. People comfortable. Right, and then you have to figure out, oh shit, this takes a lot of resources actually. So yeah, but really building this effective feedback loops then. And also somehow.
I just quickly wanted to mention me and Teva also spoke about the metadata. That's also something we are constantly working on. Also regarding what you just mentioned, all these different groups operating in different ways. So gonna make some changes to the metadata to accommodate for those different groups. They might want to use different tagging systems. We've got some ideas that we're going to work with. It's also one of our next steps.
And somehow figuring out a business model. We just had a call this morning. The thing as well, because we want to build it as a dev. Like Andre mentioned, he built the first draft of it. It's fully open source. I said, but wait, how will we actually survive this shit when everybody then can just take it? And what are we doing then? Because somehow we need to pay for the further development. And that's another thing where we will have spent a lot of time saying how to sustain the further development, and especially with the goal, you want to become obsolete, right? You don't want people rely on you, and if you drop off or somebody dies, they are fucked. Let's say, for example, right? And that's a quite tricky thing. I think it will be quite an adventure to figure this out.
Right. Well, I think what I'm noticing in the community, teams and projects don't want to do anything that's away from what immediate goal or agenda, their bread and butter, like they don't want to fiddle with servers or standing up things. But something we don't have in Cardano yet, we haven't seen a lot of, is other people coming. I guess we've seen some of that, right? People coming along, other businesses coming along and figuring out a business model for your work and then launching it, right? So I guess that's the thing to figure out. But the market for people helping you run this stuff is there. I mean, we had it recently with the round table thing. Where even after I put together a Docker compose for people to easily stand it up, nobody wanted to, right? But they wanted to just get the thing back up, right? Because that's, DAO is not a server management DAO, right? They just want to sign the token transactions and get on with their day. But the monetization thing is the thing. How do you make that sustainable before someone else does it for you?
And on that, it took quite some time the last weeks. So now there are quite some projects out there who struggle with this, and I try to refine a step-by-step guide on how developing, or actually an exercise on how to set up a business model. I put a link in the live chat here. It's structured in 6 chapters. Each chapter has 4 parts. And hopefully it's an exercise which can help projects going through an exercise, which later can result in business model. It's a strategic planning exercise. It's not fully done yet. I still work on it. But so far, yeah, anybody who want to use it, have a look on it, go through it. If you can take anything from it, then the goal is definitely achieved. I had some really good consulting and advice on setting this up. So there's some definitely, let's say, business expert insights on this. Some really good help. So yeah, when it can help, feel free to use it.
This is really good, Felix, and it's such a key point, Darlington. Felix, I'm not reading it closely right now, but a first skim of this BBI series site. There's a lot of overlap here with what we're trying to do in terms of showing people how to build their own PBL course. So it might be interesting for us to sit together and like figure out how similar they are and just say, hey, whether you want to teach people or create a sustainable business plan, there's a lot of overlap between those two things. And the overlap that leads to shared components. It leads to just common themes that we can suggest to people in terms of, hey, like, how do you go past that step of all of the optimistic talk, right? I think all of us, and it's a wonderful first step, right? To have the idealistic conversation. This is where we want to be. But as an entire community right now, like all of us are confronting this question of, okay, well, how do you make sure that you get to continue doing those things in the long term, while at the same time not veering off course from the thing you intended to focus on. I would love to roundtable that with you and anybody else who was interested.
And it's not a coincidence that it's quite close to PBL, because yeah, this is set up was the main person on it, but Julie helped, Nori helped, Dean helped, and there are some good insights on how Gimbalabs PBL work. And we had already on the very early stage, we said already, hey, cool, when we build this on this modular way and all this stuff, it might be really easy to build together then with Gimbalabs once it's done, nicely done, and maybe we can cross-link to stuff. But yeah, in the very early stages it was already like the treasury system, right? Where I said, hey, we want to use Gimbal token, we want to use standalone API, we want to use game changer wallet. Even if not visible, we are doing a lot of thinking the stuff that it's close to Gimbalabs vision as well, because since the beginning, James, we learn a lot from each other, and that's so far been a fucking beautiful way. And we're doing a lot of staying close to what you guys are developing here.
Thanks, Felix. As other folks are listening to the conversation, there was the question of next steps, and Juan's got an answer in the chat. But what else? What are we missing in this conversation in terms of next most elegant action steps?
Maybe someone here, besides Treasury Guild, has some cool insights, ideas, feedback. Jonathan, Darling, Ken, Dan, anybody here in the car?
Well, mean, my thoughts are centered around Treasury Guild still. I do think that it is a vital resource for Catalyst, Project Catalyst as a whole. So having the ability to manage Treasury for people with ideas, but not the technical skills to implement such systems. I mean, even wallet management is an overhead for anybody coming into Project Catalyst. The transactions involved, the tracking, making sure that you have got that transparency and privacy is being worked on. It's hard work. And so there are valuable people coming into the space who are, maybe winning votes because they're skilled at that sort of end of the deal, but not having the abilities to implement. So I think that, it's that sort of infrastructure tier that is being built slowly. Some of it's open source, some of it's not, but it needs to find a sustainable, like Darlington was saying, it needs to find a sustainable revenue allocating place, if not generating place. So whether it's an administrative tax on the treasury that's just put into infrastructure projects like Treasury Guild, I think that's still really important. We talked about it for the last 2 years. It's the same issue. It needs funding, recurring funding outside of the innovation phase of Catalyst. Yeah, that's my thoughts. So next elegant steps are persuade someone to give us a infrastructure budget with recurring assurance of allocation.
This point, we know that IoT loves to take stuff from the community, but we also know that they never pay for it, actually. So I'm a little careful there, to be honest, when it comes to Catalyst, because I don't want to see all these efforts here ending up on a private sidechain. No credentials, no shout out, no paying for nothing. IoT folks, when you're listening to this, yeah, as well as we know, it's true. So
yeah, well, it certainly feels like it should be CF or something like that. Something that's built into the protocol.
The protocol, man. If only we had a treasury that we can.
If only there was one.
Money out of. But one of the recent circle briefing, something that came up. I think there is a growing recognition that Catalyst infrastructure or things that support Catalyst, now that Catalyst is growing up and getting past the experiment stage, some of those infrastructure should be funded outside of the funding events. Like a core Catalyst parameter. Yeah, because treasury management is something every proposal needs. Wants to fund it, especially if your team doesn't or isn't skilled enough or feel comfortable enough to do all the multi-sig and all of that accounting and thinking about it. Or if you don't have like a business entity to receive that money, stuff like that. I don't know. Well, that is a question. How is Treasury Guild thinking about that? The real world interface and
one funny fact, we are paid by Singularity Net Foundation.
oh, not you
implementing
guys,
and
like
running this
projects you're
for the-
helping. Projects you're helping. Are you providing any sort of standard advices or resources for how they should be thinking about the real world and using something like this system?
So far, we've just manage their wallets, and we do, because we work with so many projects, we see how other people approach like project management, and So we do give some advice in some cases to help them with the payments. But we try to make that process of getting the payments to us as easy as possible. It's like the way Devo system works, it makes it super easy for us. So we're not too involved with whatever they are busy with. We just get the data and execute the transactions. But yeah, some of these projects that are struggling, we don't mind to. We try to offer some help.
Yeah, I mean, even just aggregating how other examples you've seen might just be enough too, right? So it's not
Yes.
like a financial legal advice, but this is how other people are doing it. Go consult your accountant, I suppose, on the specific jurisdiction.
We are working with Joram. We created a document with him that's got some advice about accounting. Let me see if I can find it. So, and we worked on a playbook with other people.
Right.
Let me try and find this quick. Yeah.
Well, here's a icebreaker / the next thing to fight about now that we settled on pineapple over pizza. So the question is, fewer UTXO or many UTXOs? Out of you transaction builders, what's your thoughts?
Are you talking about as inputs or outputs?
As wallet balance. So I guess there would be inputs and outputs, right?
So if I'm like, what's the expectation of a transaction builder in terms of the UTXOs it places back in a wallet after a transaction?
Right, all UTF, all yeah. If you're building transactions, are you comfortable with a wallet that, or are you expecting wallets to have, say, 20 UTXOs like as a norm, or 2, or like 1 that fits your balance you're looking for? You know?
Say that in this case, this wouldn't be our decision, because like I said, from our case, we just want to receive the data and act the transaction. Maybe one project would prefer to have a shitload, while others prefer to have as less as possible. From this point, I would say that's not up to us to decide, for example. That's much more the freedom of the project to use the system or the service to decide. And then we should figure out how to best run with it. Like I said before, this emerging standards, right? This would be, for example, something I would not want to impose on the people who use the stuff. It's much more on what do you prefer and how can we properly work with it.
Right, yeah, I think right now those are, I feel like UTXO standard is one of those things that people are talking about more and more, and wallets are starting to cement the lines they've been practicing.
Yes.
You know, like you look in some wallets, they would try to compress the UTXO downs. Other wallets tries to go the opposite direction. Oh, yeah.
It's
Right.
making me think of shoveling snow. I live in a place where we have to shovel a lot of snow. And sometimes when I have time, I I shovel the snow off the sidewalk of my neighbors. And other times I get it shoveled for me, and it's just being a good neighbor, right? And a lot of the times there's not like an immediate thanks for that. Like a lot of the times people don't even know who helped each other out, right? And so there's a lot of advantages to, let's say, the average user, maybe somebody who's a bit underinformed about how the protocol works, but they are using it. And there are things that one dApp can do to make the next interaction with some other dApp easier for the user. Now, should we care about that? I don't know, right? Like if you build something, do I have any responsibility to make sure that whoever's using my application is going to have an easier time avoiding errors with the next app they interact with? They're never going to know that I'm responsible for that, right? Like, and some might argue that they deserve the errors they get if they're just, terrorizing their wallet with all these shit coins, right? But at some point it's like, what can you do? And I know that it is easier to handle UTXOs that have at most one native asset in them, right? If you build a UTXO that has a whole bunch of different native assets, that can lead to problems later. And of course, there's people who have so many NFTs in their wallet, they can't even handle them in UTXO. And they're like, why can't I send this thing anymore, right? Whose responsibility is that? But would it feel good? Would it be like the neighborly thing to do to ensure that, your application is, if possible, spitting out UTXOs with at most one native asset in them? Like Treasury Guild could provide that. It might mean they have to send more ADA in a given transaction, or when there's not sufficient ADA, you don't split up that way. I don't know, but it's thankless. It's very similar to a lot of the dev work we're doing, right? Nobody's going to know who put in that hard work or made those decisions to make people's lives a little easier down the road.
Yeah, right on.
We woke up the professor.
What's up, Professor?
Hello, everyone. The discussion about the UTXO actually raised this question in my mind that did you guys, the Treasury Guild, implement Oracle UTXO or read-only UTXO as well, or no? If you did implement this, so instead of consuming that UTXO, we'll use the information inside that UTXO, whatever it is, token, datum, the amount of ADA, and based on that, the treasury or the logic based on that treasury will execute some action. So I wonder that have you implement such a logic or not? Thank you.
No, we're still learning. That's why we are going to build the first step with Mesh.js, but I am planning to get familiar with that UTXOs and all. So that's something I still need to learn. I just want to get this bolt up and this dApp up and running so we can scale. Because this, once that is done, then I might join. I think maybe be more active in Gimbalabs to get familiar with all those things.
Andre, it would be really great to have you at a live coding session to kind of talk through where you're at in the process. And just, there's a lot of people who are learning these concepts for the first time who will be at a similar level. But I think it's a really cool opportunity for devs in training to kind of hear where you've gotten to. And so like Playground, we get to have this kind of more philosophical leaning conversation, but if we could drill down deeper into the technical constraints and think together, I think if nothing else, that would be great for Gimbalabs to have a real problem in front of students like that. And I'm optimistic that we could make some real progress on your work. That's every Wednesday and Thursday, and just be in touch anytime. No hurry. We'll be doing it for months to come. So if that ever is helpful, just let me know.
No, definitely, John. But yeah, not immediately. Maybe in a month, 2 months. Definitely.
But thanks a lot for raising this UTXO topic, because I didn't thought about it so far. I think what would make a lot of sense, maybe that we get in touch with maybe a project which prefers not a lot of UTXOs, another one who prefers to have a shitload, and starting to build the first knowledge base on what are the advantages and disadvantages on both regarding projects. And with this being able then as well, when people come in, for example, and ask, having a validated knowledge to say, okay, you might maybe want to move more into this direction, or you more into this direction. It's actually a really good topic to think about. Thanks a lot for bringing this up, guys. Really.
Because, you know, in terms of treasury, many times the existence of a treasury would be enough for many project or many logic to get execute. We don't need to spend all the time at UTXO or something. So the existence of a UTXO, whatever value it is, like the treasury has 50,000 ADA or this amount of token, or even it contain of some authentication token or so on, would be enough, not for only for that project, but even in other project wants to get integrated, they want to partner with other projects. So let's say we have a mesh of treasury, and these treasury are interlinked with each other, and based on the amount or whatever logic they have, there will be some action. And how do we do that? How do we tell this information to other treasury without spending, without paying a fee? And I think that would be a great place to implement a read-only UTXO. Like a whole blockchain can be as a database. And then that project can, just by providing that UTXO and not just spending. So even the spending can be limited. Like if you spend that particular UTXO, okay, you are done. Any other UTXO, we don't accept it as a treasury. Only that UTXO and that hash is the one the whole community agree upon it. If you want to have another treasury, fine, no problem. But again, we have to agree with the very basic level on the UTXO itself. Not just the address, not just the wallet, not just the spot contract, but the UTXO itself, the community must be agree upon that. And then the existence of that can continue the project itself. And if when something bad happens, when that UTXO gets lost or get expended or get something to it, allow maybe there will be some action, like, okay, the treasury is gone, or this happened, or that's won't happen or something.
This is a question we've been going deep into at the Friday sessions. So if Playground is kind of very broad and live coding is a bit more technical, on Fridays we've been taking really deep dives into these kind of networks of contracts and transactions and interactions led by Mix. So
another idea, if you guys want to implement, which we will be the first project to use, that is the idea of proof of work. So let's say that a normal way, we will mint the token for what project, and we will send it or distribute it in several wallets or contract. And then we will decide who has to have the access to this and that. So like, let's say like the 1 billion of X token, and then based on the tokenomic plan, we have to distribute it, or this amount is belong to community and so on. And that will raise a question of security, how, and the trust and permission and so on. But what I was thinking about, especially like what is read-only and how to implement it and using blockchain, is we don't need to mint everything at the beginning. We can just create some minting contract, and of course the other smart contract, and the project can mint the same thing and fund the treasury along the way. So we don't need to put all the token or UTXO event or flood that with all this UTXO, but we can just continue the project, and then based on the needs, based on the activity, even we can create some logic. Like if the community use it, okay, now there will be more minting. If the community doesn't use it that much, there will be less minting. So even the value and the usage can correspond to each other. So the treasury by itself, and all run by code, by the way, no any human involved in that, can control itself. Even about the burning as well, if a project wants to implement burning. So minting and burning can control everything on chain. We don't, so again, that would maybe ease some mind about the trust, about why these guys should have all these token at their wallet or their smart contract, whatever. I don't think we need that. We have the tools to build a treasury or a treasury logic based on the, let's say, proof of work or mint as you go or something.
Well, I know we're over time. We always, there's this thing that happens at Playground where we get to a really exciting conversation in the last 15 minutes. But no, thanks. Thanks for taking us all the way through this one. I think we covered a lot. We covered a variety of ground today. And Swarm, don't be strangers. Treasury Guild team, thank you for presenting today. And I hope to see you guys back in a couple months, because it sounds like there's going to be some really good updates between now and then. And as I said, I would love for Gimbalabs to support the technical side of your work as you keep going.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Always, man. Cool. Well, we're going to go off air and then stick around for some Plutus PBL planning. All are welcome to stick around, but obviously I know that people got busy schedules. So if you got to jump, see you soon.